My name is Frances Carter. And I was 26 years old the day my mother told me adopting a baby girl would destroy my life. I was single. No husband. No family waiting with casseroles and congratulations. Just a 2-bedroom apartment. A crib I assembled myself. And a county job in Child Protective Services that paid $42,000 a year before taxes. My mother said, "You can't even take care of yourself." My father said, "That child will ruin your life." And the same afternoon I brought my daughter home. The exact same day I held her in my arms for the first time. A letter arrived in my mailbox. Cream-colored paper. Monogrammed initials. Heavy enough to feel important before I even opened it. It wasn't a congratulations card. It was a warning. But what none of them knew was that 14 years later, that same baby girl would stand in front of 300 people and read my mother's words out loud. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just truthfully. And sometimes, truth is louder than screaming ever could be. Before Lily. Before the letter. Before any of it. I worked for County Child Protective Services. Beige office. Buzzing fluorescent lights. Coffee that tasted faintly like burnt cardboard. Every desk buried under manila folders. Open cases. Pending reviews. Children nobody could stop worrying about after 5 o'clock. I was good at my job. Not perfect. Nobody in child services is perfect. But good enough that supervisors trusted me with the difficult cases. The quiet ones. The homes that looked stable on paper, but felt wrong the second you stepped inside. I knew how to read kitchens. Fridge contents. Laundry piles. The way children flinched when adults moved too quickly. I knew the system. I believed in it. Mostly. I also watched it fail constantly. Too many children. Too few placements. Too many adults treating love like a temporary resource. Then at 24, my gynecologist sat across from me holding test results and said, "Stage 3 endometriosis." She said it gently. Doctors always say devastating things gently. Like softness changes permanence. I asked the question immediately. The only question that mattered. Can I still have children? The pause before her answer told me everything already. It's unlikely. Unlikely. Such a careful word for grief. I didn't tell my parents for 6 months. Not because I was hiding it. Because some news deserves a little privacy before judgment arrives. When I finally told them. Sunday dinner. Roast chicken. Overcooked carrots. My mother folded her napkin slowly and said, "Well, maybe that's God's way of saying you weren't meant to be a mother." She said it calmly. Like wisdom. Like comfort. My father reached for the bread basket. My sister Stacy stared at her plate. Nobody corrected my mother. Nobody said, "That's a horrible thing to say." Silence sat at the table like an extra guest. I drove home with the windows down even though it was November. Cold air. Hands tight on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I just kept hearing the sentence replaying in my head. Not meant to be a mother. The next morning, I arrived at work at 7:12 a.m. Opened my first case file. Newborn girl. Surrendered at regional medical 3 days earlier. No next of kin listed. No placement assigned yet. I read the file once. Then again. Then a third time. Tiny details. 7 pounds. Brown eyes. Healthy vitals. No confirmed relatives. And somewhere during that third reading, something shifted quietly inside me. Not dramatically. No movie moment. Just a feeling. Like a lock turning softly after years of being stuck. I spent 4 months completing my own adoption approval process. Which is a surreal experience when you've written hundreds of those reports yourself. Background checks. Financial disclosures. Home inspections. Reference letters. I knew exactly how agencies evaluated parents. Which somehow made it more terrifying. Margaret Hayes, my supervisor, wrote one of my references. When I asked her, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Took you long enough. I blinked. What? You've been mothering abandoned children since your first week here. That sentence stayed with me. Because sometimes strangers recognize parts of you long before family does. When my approval came through, I told my parents at Sunday dinner again. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me still wanted blessing from people who only understood control. Mom at the head of the table. Dad across from me. Stacy beside her husband Greg. Same dining room. Same silence waiting underneath everything. I've been approved to adopt, I said. A baby girl. Silence. Forks paused halfway. My mother set hers down carefully. The way she always did before saying something designed to wound quietly. You can't even take care of yourself, Francis. No yelling. That was her specialty. She never raised her voice. She just lowered everyone else's. Dad shook his head slowly. That child will ruin your life. I looked at Stacy. She stared at her napkin. She's not a problem, I said carefully. She's a baby. Mom leaned back in her chair. What am I supposed to tell people at church? The question stunned me slightly. Not. Are you ready? Not. Do you need help? What will people think? She's not someone else's mistake, I said. She is, my mother replied immediately. And you're choosing this over your family. That sentence told me everything. Because families that require obedience before love aren't really families at all. I stood up slowly. Placed my napkin beside the plate. Walked to the door. Nobody followed me. Not my father. Not Stacy. Nobody. The drive home took 37 minutes. No radio. No music. Just headlights sliding across wet pavement. And somewhere during that drive, I realized something painful. The child I hadn't even met yet already loved me more honestly than my own family did. Because she needed nothing from me except care. And somehow, that made everything simpler, the day I adopted Lily. It rained from sunrise until almost evening. Soft rain. Steady rain. The kind that makes entire cities feel quieter than usual. I woke up at 5:11 a.m. Not because my alarm rang. Because sleep had become impossible. I checked the diaper bag 3 separate times. Bottles. Pacifiers. Extra onesies. Wipes. Tiny socks folded carefully inside side pockets. Then checked everything again anyway. Margaret picked me up at 7. She claimed she was just driving. But honestly, I think she was afraid I'd crash the car from nervousness. And she probably wasn't wrong. The foster agency sat inside a converted office building on Prospect Street. Beige brick. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. Government-issued sadness in architectural form. The same kind of building where people's lives quietly change forever. A caseworker named Diana greeted us at the front desk. Mid-40s. Kind eyes. Clipboard permanently attached to one arm. You ready? She asked gently. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because there was no human answer big enough for that question. I've been ready for years. They brought her in wrapped in a white blanket. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Brown eyes wide open already. Studying ceiling lights like she was trying to understand the world immediately. And when Diana placed her in my arms, everything inside me went silent. Not emotional silence. Certain silence. The kind that arrives when something finally feels exactly right. Lily wrapped one tiny hand around my pinky finger. And just held on. That was it. No dramatic movie music. No lightning strike. Just a tiny hand gripping mine like she already trusted me. I signed the adoption papers inside a small office with a table that wobbled every time someone leaned too hard against it. Page 11. Page 14. Page 22. Blue ink. My name becoming her mother legally. One signature at a time. When it was finished, Diana slid the final folder closed and smiled. Congratulations, Mom. Mom. Nobody had ever called me that before. Margaret cried immediately. Full tears. No shame. I just sat there holding Lily against my chest trying to process the fact that my entire life had changed inside a government office with buzzing lights and terrible carpeting. The drive home felt surreal. I kept checking the rearview mirror every 30 seconds. Tiny face. Tiny blanket. Tiny human trusting me completely already. Margaret followed behind us in her own car the entire way home. Just in case. The apartment looked smaller once Lily arrived. Not physically. Emotionally. Because suddenly, every object carried responsibility. The crib I assembled alone in my living room. The mobile from a consignment shop. Little wooden stars dangling overhead. I placed Lily gently inside the crib. She stared upward at the spinning stars silently. And I stood there watching her breathe. Then the mailbox clicked downstairs. I almost ignored it. Almost. But habit pulled me toward the door. Bills. Coupons. And one cream-colored envelope. Heavy paper stock. Monogrammed initials embossed in the corner. D.C. Donna Carter. My mother. Not a card. A letter. The kind people send after funerals. I carried it upstairs slowly while Lily slept against my shoulder. Set it on the kitchen counter beside a half-prepared bottle. And for a moment, I just stared at it. Because some envelopes radiate damage before they're even opened. Finally, I unfolded the paper. Francis, it began. Formal. Cold already. I cannot support this decision. I kept reading. You are throwing your life away for someone else's mistake. The words blurred slightly. Not from tears. From disbelief. That child comes from God knows where. You don't know her parents. You don't know what problems she'll bring. And you expect us to pretend this is normal? Then the final lines. Don't come home. Don't call. Don't bring her here. Until you come to your senses. You are on your own. Signed. Mom. I read the letter twice. Maybe 3 times. Not because I needed clarification. Because cruelty feels surreal when it comes from someone who taught you how to tie your shoes. Lily started crying softly from the bedroom. Tiny hungry sounds. And suddenly, the letter stopped mattering quite as much. I folded it carefully. Placed it back inside the envelope. Found an old shoebox in my closet. Brown cardboard from a pair of boots I bought in college. And placed the letter inside. Then I fed my daughter. Because one person in that apartment needed love immediately. And one person needed distance permanently. The first year nearly broke me. Not emotionally. Logistically. There's a difference. I returned to work after 8 weeks because single adoptive mothers don't get extended miracles from county payroll departments. Daycare waitlists stretched 3 months long. Margaret watched Lily in her office temporarily. A pack-and-play beside filing cabinets and state reports. Lily slept through budget meetings and custody briefings. Everyone in the department pretended not to notice. Which was their version of kindness. Money disappeared constantly. Formula. Daycare fees. Gas. Pediatric appointments. I learned how to calculate grocery totals before reaching the register. Which cereal brands stayed under budget. Which weeks required sacrificing sleep for overtime. Lily developed colic at 4 months. Not mild colic. Catastrophic colic. The kind where babies cry from evening until sunrise like their tiny bodies are protesting existence itself. I walked apartment hallways at 2 in the morning, bouncing her gently against my shoulder. Socks sliding against cheap carpet. Humming songs I invented because exhaustion erased every lullaby I'd ever known. One night, my neighbor from 4B knocked on the wall hard enough to shake picture frames. "Keep that baby quiet." I stared at the wall silently. Then looked down at Lily screaming against my shoulder. "I'm trying," I whispered. Not to him. To her. To myself. To the entire impossible situation. Margaret left casseroles outside my apartment once a week. No notes. Just food. The purest kind of help. Christmas arrived quietly that year. Mom hosted dinner for 14 people. I knew because Stacy posted pictures online. Matching sweaters. Ham glazed perfectly. Everyone smiling beside the fireplace. Meanwhile, Lily and I shared macaroni and cheese beside a 2-foot artificial tree from the dollar store. One silver bell ornament hanging near the top. That was it. And honestly, it was still one of the happiest Christmases of my life. Because nobody at that table questioned whether we belonged together. At 14 months, Lily stood beside the kitchen counter gripping the edge with both hands and said, "Mama." Clear. Confident. Like she'd practiced secretly for weeks. I turned off the faucet immediately. Picked her up so fast she laughed. "That's right," I whispered. "I'm Mama." And for the first time since the adoption, I finally cried. Not because of my mother's letter. Not because of exhaustion. Because suddenly, I understood something. Families aren't built by blood. Or permission. Or church approval. They're built by showing up every single day. Even when nobody claps for you. Especially then, Lily was for the first time she asked why we never visited my parents. Simple question. Children always ask devastating things simply. We were baking banana bread. Flour everywhere. Tiny fingerprints pressed across the counter like evidence. Lily sat on the kitchen stool swinging her legs while I mashed bananas beside her. "Do I have a grandma?" she asked casually. I paused. Just long enough for her to notice. Because children notice everything adults try hiding. "Yes," I said carefully. "Where is she?" Interesting question. Not who. Where. Like grandmothers were places you could visit if given correct directions. I measured cinnamon slowly before answering. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people. Lily nodded seriously. Like this information belonged beside multiplication tables and bedtime rules. "Did she hurt you?" I looked at my daughter. Curly hair tied unevenly. Purple pajamas 2 sizes too big. Tiny face waiting for honesty. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying about parenthood. Children don't just inherit your eyes. They inherit your unfinished grief if you aren't careful. A little, I admitted. Lily considered that quietly. Then asked the question that broke me completely. Did I hurt her too? I set the spoon down immediately. Because no child should ever wonder if their existence caused rejection. No, baby. I crouched beside her stool. You never hurt anybody by being loved. That sentence became one of our household rules after that. Alongside, we tell the truth. And we clean up our own messes. And people don't earn love by being perfect. I built our home carefully. Deliberately. Like someone constructing safety from materials they never received themselves. Lily grew into sunlight. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Bright. Curious. The kind of child who talks to grocery store cashiers like old friends. Who rescued worms after rainstorms. Who named every plant in our apartment. At 6. She informed her first-grade teacher that tomatoes were technically fruit but emotionally vegetables. At 8. She started reading novels beneath blankets with a flashlight long after bedtime. At 10. She announced she wanted to become a lawyer because people should have somebody on their side when adults are unfair. I nearly dropped my coffee when she said it. Because somehow, without ever hearing the full story, she still understood the shape of it. Meanwhile, my family existed mostly through second-hand information. Stacy sent occasional Christmas cards. Always signed. Love from all of us. Never personal. Never mentioning Lily directly. My father called twice a year. Birthdays mostly. Conversations awkward and careful. Like two people crossing thin ice while pretending not to notice cracking sounds underneath them. Mom never called. Not once. But she asked about Lily constantly through Stacy. What grade is she in now? Does she look like Frances? Is she healthy? Questions filtered through other people because curiosity feels safer than accountability. When Lily turned 11, Stacy visited unexpectedly one Saturday afternoon. No warning. Just her SUV pulling into my apartment parking lot during a thunderstorm. She stood at my door soaked from the rain holding a grocery store sheet cake awkwardly. Happy birthday to Lily, she said too quickly. Like rehearsed politeness. I almost didn't let her in. Almost. But Lily appeared behind me immediately. Who is it? Then smiled brightly before I could answer. Oh. Your Aunt Stacy. Stacy froze. Actually froze. Because nobody prepared her for warmth. Children raised with love confuse people accustomed to conditional affection. Lily grabbed her hand instantly. Come see my room. And just like that, my sister was dragged into a world my mother spent 11 years refusing to acknowledge. The visit lasted 3 hours. 3 strange, careful hours. Stacy helped with birthday decorations. Ate pizza at our kitchen table. Watched Lily perform an aggressively dramatic violin recital beside the couch. And the entire time, I noticed something unsettling. My sister looked guilty. Not performative guilt. Real guilt. The kind that settles slowly into people after years of silence. When Lily ran to her room searching for art supplies, Stacy finally looked at me and whispered, "She's amazing." I nodded once. I know. Stacy stared down at her paper plate for several seconds. Then quietly, Mom keeps your adoption letter in her nightstand. The room tilted slightly. What? She reads it sometimes. I laughed once. Sharp. Disbelieving. Why? Stacy's eyes filled immediately. Because I think she knows it was unforgivable. That sentence sat between us heavily. Because some apologies arrive years too late to function normally. You could have called, I said softly. All those years. Stacy nodded immediately. I know. No excuses. Which somehow hurt worse. Because excuses at least create distance from responsibility. Honesty places it directly in your hands. Before leaving, Stacy stood awkwardly near the door while Lily hugged her tightly. "You should come back," Lily said brightly. And my sister almost cried. Because children offer forgiveness before adults even understand they need it. 2 weeks later, my father appeared at Lily's middle school debate competition. Alone. Gray sweater. Hands shoved nervously into pockets. I nearly didn't recognize him at first. Age had softened him strangely. Made him smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Like regret had been quietly sanding pieces off him for years. He sat in the back row silently while Lily argued against year-round schooling with terrifying confidence. Afterward, she spotted him near the auditorium doors. "Are you my grandpa?" Direct. Immediate. My father blinked rapidly. Then nodded once. "Yes." Lily smiled. "Cool." That was it. No resentment. No interrogation. Just acceptance. Because children don't naturally understand inherited distance. Adults teach them that later. Dad visited 3 more times after that. Always alone. Always quietly. School concerts. Debate tournaments. One awkward lunch at a pancake restaurant where Lily explained cryptocurrency to a deeply confused 70-year-old man for 40 straight minutes. He adored her instantly. Which made everything harder. Because watching someone love your child after refusing them once creates a very specific kind of grief. Not rage. Mourning. For the years that never existed. Then one Tuesday evening, Dad called unexpectedly. His voice sounded wrong immediately. Tighter. Fragile somehow. "Your mother's sick." Everything inside me went still. Not emotional stillness. Instinctive. The kind that arrives before impact. "Cancer," he whispered. "Stage 4 pancreatic. Same disease that killed Grandma Eleanor." Aggressive. Unforgiving. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. Lily doing homework quietly in the next room, unaware her entire family history was rearranging itself again. "She wants to see you," Dad said. Long silence. Then softer. "She wants to meet Lily." I looked toward the hallway. Toward my daughter humming softly while highlighting science notes in purple marker. And suddenly, the shoebox in my closet felt heavier than it had in 14 years. Because some letters never really stopped being opened, I waited 9 days before visiting my mother. Not to punish her. To decide whether I could survive it. Because forgiveness and access are not the same thing. People confuse that constantly. Lily sat beside me at the kitchen table the night before the visit, eating cereal straight from the box. 14 years old. Long curls tied into a messy knot. Reading constitutional law cases for fun like a tiny exhausted attorney. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," she said casually. I looked at her carefully. "When did you get so wise?" She shrugged. "I was raised by a social worker." "Fair enough." Then softly. "Do you want me to come?" That question mattered. Not because she was asking permission. Because she understood emotional weight before entering rooms. I thought about the letter. The shoebox. 14 years of silence. Then nodded once. Yes. The hospital smelled exactly like every hospital always does. Antiseptic. Coffee. Fear disguised as cleanliness. Dad met us in the hallway outside oncology. Older now. Much older than 72 should look. His sweater hung loosely against shrinking shoulders. And when he saw Lily, his entire face softened immediately. There's my girl. Lily hugged him carefully. Natural now. Easy. Like they'd had years together instead of borrowed time. Dad looked at me afterward. Nervous. Ashamed. Hopeful. All at once. She's awake, he whispered. I expected anger walking into that room. Or satisfaction. Or closure. Instead, I felt grief. Because my mother looked small. Smaller than I had ever imagined possible. Cancer had hollowed her sharply. Cheekbones visible. Skin paper thin. The woman who once controlled entire rooms with a glance now struggled lifting a cup of water. She looked toward the doorway slowly. Then saw Lily first. And immediately started crying. Not elegant crying. Not manipulative crying. Just devastation. You look like Francis, she whispered. Lily smiled politely. I get that a lot. My mother laughed weakly through tears. Then looked at me. Really looked. For maybe the first time in my entire life without judgment standing between us. You came. The same sentence people always say when they expected abandonment after causing it. Yes, I answered quietly. Mom nodded slowly. Then her eyes drifted toward Lily again. She's beautiful. Interesting word. Beautiful. Because 14 years earlier, my mother called her a mistake before ever seeing her face. And now, beauty arrived before apology. Lily sat beside the bed naturally. Comfortably. Like kindness was her default setting instead of something earned carefully. They talked for 20 minutes about school. Debate club. Books. Plants. At one point Lily pulled out pictures of her science fair project. My mother studied every photo like someone trying desperately to memorize lost time. Then finally, she looked at me and whispered, I need to say something. Dad quietly left the room. Bless him for understanding that some conversations require witnesses removed. Lily started to stand too. No, my mother said quickly. Please stay. So Lily stayed. And honestly, I think that mattered more than anything. Because accountability sounds different when spoken in front of the people you harmed. My mother folded trembling hands against the blanket. I was jealous of you. No preparation. No excuses first. Just truth. Simple. Direct. The sentence stunned me silent. You wanted motherhood so badly, she continued weakly. And when doctors told you it might never happen. Pause. I thought life had finally made us equal. I felt physically cold hearing it aloud. Because somewhere deep down, I always suspected. But hearing a parent admit they found comfort inside your grief changes something permanently. Mom's breathing shook unevenly. Then you adopted Lily anyway. Tears slipped quietly down her face. And instead of breaking, you became happier than I'd ever seen you. Lily looked at me silently from the bedside chair. Not shocked. Just listening carefully. My mother closed her eyes briefly. I hated you for surviving without my approval. The room went completely still. Because there it was. The real wound underneath everything. Not the adoption. Not church gossip. Control. I built a life she couldn't regulate anymore. And some parents confuse obedience with love for so long. They can't recognize either once separated. Mom opened her eyes again slowly. The letter. She swallowed hard. I read it constantly. I almost laughed sadly. Stacy was right. I kept waiting for it to stop sounding cruel. Long silence. It never did. That sentence landed somewhere deep inside me. Because remorse doesn't erase damage. But honest remorse acknowledges it fully. And honestly, that matters. Lily reached into her backpack quietly then pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Can I show you something?" she asked. My mother nodded carefully. Lily unfolded the paper slowly. Speech notes. Typed. Highlighted. "This is for the scholarship banquet next month," she explained. "I'm speaking." My mother smiled weakly. "That's wonderful." Lily nodded. Then looked directly at her. "I included something you wrote." My stomach tightened immediately. Because suddenly, I knew. Lily unfolded a second paper carefully. Cream-colored. Monogrammed initials faded slightly with age. The letter. The room lost oxygen instantly. Mom stared at it like a ghost. "You kept it," she whispered. "I kept everything," I answered quietly. Lily looked between both of us carefully. Then said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. I wanted to understand how someone could write these things about a baby they never met. No anger. No cruelty. Just genuine curiosity. And somehow, that made it infinitely more devastating. My mother broke completely then. Real sobbing. The kind that comes from finally seeing yourself clearly after years avoiding mirrors. "I was wrong," she whispered over and over. "So wrong." Lily waited patiently until the crying settled slightly. Then asked softly, "Can I tell you what happened instead?" Mom nodded immediately through tears. So Lily smiled. Small. Gentle. And began reading from her scholarship speech. "My mother taught me family is not biology. It is consistency. It is showing up. It is staying kind when bitterness would be easier. She taught me love is a daily decision. Not a reward people earn by being convenient." My mother covered her mouth, crying silently. Because every sentence described the woman she failed to become. And the woman I became anyway. When Lily finished, the room stayed quiet for a long time. Then my mother looked at me and whispered, "You did everything right. 14 years late. But true. And sometimes truth arriving late still matters." Mom died 6 weeks later. Quietly. Dad called at 4:18 in the morning. Voice hollowed out by grief. At the funeral, the church overflowed with people praising Donna Carter's generosity. Her church work. Her famous lemon cakes. The version of her easier to remember publicly. Then Lily stepped to the podium. 300 people watching. 14 years old. Steady hands. Steady voice. And she read part of the letter aloud. Not cruelly. Not dramatically. Truthfully. Then she folded the paper carefully and said, "My grandmother once believed I would ruin someone's life." She looked directly toward the crowd. "I hope she knew before she died that my mother gave me one instead." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And standing there in the front pew, I realized something extraordinary. The child my family rejected became the person who finally told the truth with compassion. Which honestly felt like healing. Real healing. Not because the damage disappeared. Because love survived it anyway.